White and golden Lizzie stood, like a lily in the flood, like a rock of blue veined stone, lashed by tides obstreperously, like a beacon left alone in a hoary roaring sea, sending up a golden fire, like a fruit crowned orange tree, white with blossoms honey sweet, sore beset by wasp and bee, like a royal virgin town, topped with glided dome and spire, close beleaguered by a fleet mad to tug her standard down. There is a word obstreperously that means resisting control or restraint in a difficult manner. So Lizzie is stranded the way a ship is stranded in an ocean. She is all alone, scared and suffering, and has nobody to turn to. So Lizzie is a town under attack. Lizzie is also compared to a lily amidst a flood. She just stands tall and doesn't give up when she is being attacked and being forced feed. So one may lead a horse to water, 20 cannot make him drink. Though the goblins cuffed and caught her, coaxed and fought her, bullied and besought her, scratched her, pinched her black as ink, kicked her and knocked her, mulled and mocked her, Lizzie uttered not a word, would not open lip from lip, lest they should cram a mouthful in, but laughed in her heart to feel the drip of juice that syruped all her face, and lodged in dimples of her chin, and streaked her neck with quacked like curd. At last the evil people, worn out by her resistance, flung her penny fruit, kicked their fruit along whichever road they took, not leaving root or stone or shoot. Some writhed into the ground, some dived into the brook with ring and ripple, some scudded on a gale without a sound, some vanished in a distance. The goblins tried to forcefully put the fruits into the mouth of Lizzie, but they could not make Lizzie swallow anything. So she shuts her mouth completely, and no matter how much she is knocked out and she is knocked and kicked and pinched, she is not uttering a single word. She is not opening her lips in the fear that they will shove in a mouthful of fruits. The goblins at the end get very tired of Lizzie's resistance and they disappear. They do not leave any trace behind, any fruit or stone or kernel, nothing. They give her the penny back before disappearing. When all these strugglings were happening, all the fruit juices were smeared on Lizzie's all over the face and all over her body. She smiles in her heart that all the fruit juices are smeared on her. She is now devising a plan when all these things are happening to her. In a smart ache tingle, Lizzie went her way, knew not was it night or day, sprang up the bank, tore through the furze, treated copse and dingle, and heard her penny jingle, bouncing in her purse. Its bounce was music to her ear. She ran and ran, as if she feared some goblin man dogged her with jibe or curse, or something worse. But not one goblin scurried after, nor was she pricked by fear. The kind heart made her windy taste, that urged her home quite out of breath with haste, and inward laughter. When the goblins disappear, Lizzie runs back. She has no idea if the goblins have cursed her. We see kind heart is mentioned. This is Lizzie's motive to save her sister and not herself. Here is a difference between Lizzie and Laura. Whereas Laura's approach was self-satisfaction, Lizzie's reason for going to the goblin men was not selfish. She is happy to escape. She runs and runs and she thinks that the goblin men maybe are pursuing her, but or maybe they are about to curse her. She also does not know whether it is day or night, so there is a repetition. After Laura comes back from the goblins, Laura also does not remember whether it is day or night. Same thing happens to Lizzie. Lizzie also does not remember whether it is day or night. Her motive gives her wind pace and she runs home. She can feel the silver penny in her purse, and that music, that jingle of the silver penny is like a music to her. Probably that penny is very necessary and they do not have a lot of money, and that penny and wasting that penny is something she cannot afford. So getting the penny back is happiness for Lizzie. She cried, Laura, up the garden. Did you miss me? Come and kiss me. Never mind my bruises. Hug me, kiss me, suck my juices. Squeezed from goblin fruits for you. Goblin pulp and goblin dew. Eat me, drink me, love me. Laura, make much of me. For your sake I have braved the glen and had to do with goblin merchant men. After coming home, Lizzie asked Laura to suck the juices from her face. So here Rosity uses very intimate sexual images. So this is an important step in Lizzie's life. She is crossing the border. She is also participating in Laura's enjoyment. Here we find that eating the body has far more religious connotations than apparently it looked. Here we can remember Corpus Christi festival and Christ offering his body as sacrificial lamb. Here we see the reenactment of Corpus Christi. Lizzie becomes a Christ-like figure. The way it is described, it can be felt that Rosity wants to describe the response of the sense organs. Laura started from her chair, flung her arms in the air, clutched her hair. Lizzie, Lizzie, have you tasted, for my sake, the fruit forbidden? Must your light like mine be hidden, your young life like mine be wasted, undone in mine undoing, and ruined in my ruin, thirsty, cankered, goblin-ridden? She clung about her sister, kissed and kissed and kissed her. Tears once again refreshed her sunken eyes, dropping like rain after long sultry drought, shaking with anguish, fear and pain. She kissed and kissed her with a hungry mouth. Laura is feeling guilty that Lizzie has tasted the goblin's forbidden fruit for her sake. So now Laura is thinking that Lizzie's life will also be withered away just like hers. Lizzie's life will also be wasted in the same way her life has also been wasted. Then we find healing images. Laura cannot avoid the fruit juices. At the same time, she is aware what Lizzie has gone through. Her lips began to scorch. The juice was wormwood to her tongue. She loathed the feast. Writhing as one possessed, she leaped and sung, rent all her robe and wrung her hands in lamentable haste, and beat her breast. Her locks streamed like the torch borne by a dare at full speed, or like a mane of horses in their flight, or like an eagle when she stems the light straight towards the sun, or like a caged thing freed, or like a flying flag when armies run. We see a word wormwood here, that is a bitter medicinal herb. So Laura, as she sucked the fruit juices out of Lizzie's face and body, she does not enjoy the fruit juices anymore. While at the beginning she has enjoyed this taste, the same juice smeared on Lizzie's face has lost its taste. Laura responds with irritation as she cannot get the same taste which she had before. She is totally panicked in the situation. At the same time, she feels that Lizzie lost too much trying to get it for her. Her consumption of the fruit juices smeared on Lizzie's face acted as an antidote. It did not give her the yearning taste, but somehow it killed the desire. Swift fire spread through her veins, knocked at her heart, met the fire smoldering there, and overbore its lesser flame. She gorged on bitterness without a name, a fool to choose such part of foul giving care. Sense failed in mortal strife, like the watchtower of a town which an earthquake shatters down, like a lightning stricken mast, like a wind uprooted tree, spun about like a foam topped water sprout, cast down headlong in the sea, she fell last. Pleasure past and anguish past. Is it death or is it life? The consumption of the fruit juice on Lizzie's face acted as an antidote. It did not give her the same yearning taste, but it did something. It extinguished the fire she had inside her. This was the fire of desire or the fire of thirst. There is a word used here, that is gorged, that means swallowed. So the antidote went inside her and finally she fell down. Her falling down has been compared to different things here. So she goes beyond pain and pleasure. She is almost dead. And the poet asks the question whether it is death or whether it is life, or it is life after death. So Lizzie has brought Laura back from death, life out of death. That night long Lizzie watched by her, counted her pulses, flagging star, felt for her breath, held water to her lips and cooled her face with tears and fanning leaves. But when the first birds chirped about their eaves and early reapers plodded to the place of golden shaves and dew-wet grass, bowed in the morning winds to so brisk to pass, and new birds with new day opened the cup like lilies on the stream, Laura awake as if from a dream, laughed in the innocent old way, hugged Lizzie, but not twice or thrice. Her gleaming locks showed not one thread of grey, her breath was sweet as May, and light danced in her eyes. Throughout the night, we see that Lizzie takes care of Laura. She does not know what will happen next. So then we have a description of dawn, a new day beginning. People go to work as usual, the early dippers, and the birds started chirping. The whole experience is described as a dream fantasy or nightmare. It is as if Laura is renewed in vigor. She is now recovered completely. The poet uses the word to describe Laura are the conventional word people use to describe maidens. Like her breath is as sweet as May and there is a light danced in her eyes. All these words are usually used to describe the maidens. Days, weeks, months, year afterwards, when both were wives with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up in tender lies, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long gone, of not returning time. Who would talk about the haunted lane, the wicked quaint fruit merchant men, their fruits like honey to the throat but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any town. Would tell them how her sister stood in deadly peril to do her good and win the fiery antidote. Then joining hands to little hands would bid them cling together. For there is no friend like a sister in calm or stormy weather, to cheer one on the tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. Laura is a mother and a wife in future. The sisters are now totally rooted in domestic wars. Laura talks about her early years to her children. There is an element of nostalgia we hear. She thinks about those days as something she loves to talk about. It ends with a very fond message of sisterhood. The bond of sisterhood is a very powerful one. It protects through empathy. It is not anti-men, as we don't see any judgment against men. Goblins are not men. They are straightaway corrupting agents. Laura's experience gave her an insight into her sister's sacrifice for her. Let us talk about the symbols in the poem. There are some words which have larger significance than the apparent meaning in the text. These are symbols. Symbols are often words stand for more than it means. When a word gains a certain symbol, that means the people have understood those words in that way. Symbols usually gain signification by universal sanction. Two kinds of symbols are there in the text. One is prominent symbols which we can identify on spot, and another one is a vague or sublime symbol which are found by the process of derivation. Some symbols gain signification over the time in their context of the 21st century. So if we look at the prominent symbols are the symbol of the fruits. It is loaded with biblical ethos. It is equated with forbidden fruit that Eve plucked from the tree of knowledge. What is important here that Rossetti is talking about the taste being forbidden. The taste is an important element here, which Milton talks about in Paradise Lost, the mortal taste. Ironically, the fruit is also the symbol of health and nutrition, and something which has a lot of natural element. Here we see the meaning is inverted. So Rossetti is taking up something which is very natural and turning them into something that they do not mean in real life. So here fruits become something very vicious instead of something which provides nourishment. When Rossetti mentions the names of the fruits, they are ordinary names. Because their origin is unknown, there is a doubt about the positivity of the fruits. So the fruit which is normally a positive thing, that becomes a negative symbol because of the temptation. Because fruits have negative connotation, therefore the goblins who offer the fruits become a Satan figure. A whole mental frame is created. So this can be an archetype. So what is an archetype? It is described by Carl Jung that it is a primitive mental image that is inherited from the earliest ancestors and supposed to be present in collective unconsciousness. So when the poet is Christian, so it is not wrong to say that she is directing our thoughts towards the Christian allegory. So when we talk about goblins as extension of Satan, we talk about the archetype of Satan appearing through these goblin figures. So the whole story, we see the story of fall and resurrection. So definitely the story has a Satan figure, that is the goblin, and a human figure, that is Laura, and a Christ-like figure, that is Lizzie. When we think of the words gold, white, we think of something pure and valuable. That is how archetypes play in human consciousness. The poet talks about the sisters in terms of golden head, white dress, as if she wants to project the idea of innocence. The reader's concept of purity and virginity are here portrayed through these words. Laura has golden hair and she clips one lock, and that is when she starts going into depression and her hair turns grey. There is a direct connection between the change of the color of her hair and her situation. We see that grey is a color that is associated with wasting away and degeneration. We see that in describing the goblins, the poet uses the word dove. Doves are usually the symbols of purity and innocence, but the goblins are not doves. Their words are like doves. Temptation comes in a shape of something assuring, something alluring, so that it does not get understood as something evil. In the face of temptation, both the sisters are compared to lilies. Lilies are symbols of innocence and purity. Unlike roses, which look very complicated as if they hide something in their folds, lilies are very simple. But there is a difference between the comparison with lilies with the sisters. Laura is a lily from the Beck. Beck is a mountain river. So its life is easy. So Laura does not put up a fight with the goblins. But Lizzie is like a lily in the flood. She stands strong and resists. The same symbol is used in two different ways and by placing them into two different contexts. Another symbol is we see that the cutting of golden locks. This is something like a dishonorable exchange. Laura is equated with a fallen woman. In Victorian period, loose hair was associated with dishonorable women. So this is an archetype present in our culture even. In Hinduism, we see that women are often told to tie their hair during evening, otherwise something evil might possess them. And there are plenty of stories of women getting possessed by various spirits, by harmful spirits, just because they kept their hair loose during the evening time. So this loose hair is an archetype. Lizzie's hair, on the other hand, we see that they do not turn grey. So even though the goblins take a bunch of hair, like when the struggle was going on, they tore a bunch of hair from her head. Because this is not a voluntary submission. Lizzie does not give consent to take her hair away, whereas Laura gives the hair with consent. Another archetype we find is the Corpus Christi. Lizzie is emerging as a Christ-like figure. If we talk about the themes of the poem, the themes are temptation, redemption, sisterhood, desire versus duty, agency, choice and consequences. The themes are also innocence and experience. There is a duality in this poem. So we can ask this question, is the poet trying to tell us that innocence is something good and experience is something bad? This particular concept we get from William Blake in his context of the tiger. In The Tiger, Blake describes that there is darkness lurking all around us. It takes a tiger to fight against the darkness and bring about the ending of suffering through suffering itself. He is not the person who is anti-experience. He talks about how experience corrupts the innocence. Also looking for a redemption, and redemption lies beyond the experience. The last line of Paradise Lost, we see hand in hand they went down. It was for dejection completely. After Adam and Eve fell, they held hand in hand and they went down. So this is not dejection completely. They are experienced, but they are now looking forward to the future. There is this greater man who was going to redeem them. The concepts of temptation, fall and redemption are intimately associated with innocence and experience. And again, it is related to the question of choice. We see that choice is not always related to action. Choice is also something that is related to intention. It is not what you do, rather it is why you do. So the intention turns into an act of sin and redemption. Another theme of this poem is the connection between women and commerce. And when Lizzie went to the goblins, she had a penny. But when Laura went, she had nothing. So if she had money, she might not have to snip off her curls. It was just because she had no money, she had to pay the higher price by giving up her golden locks. We see that there is the absence of property rights. We also see that Lizzie later heard the jingle of the penny in the purse when she was running back to her home. She is happy with the jingling of that penny. Though she took the penny, but it was better that she did not spend it. Spending is something that women did not have at their juncture. When women would spend, they would have to give the account for spending. Economics, we see, is a realm of men, and it is also important from the point of view of feminist movement. The first wave of feminism was during this period when this poem was published. The focus of the feminists were one, women's suffrage, married women to be allowed to own and get property right and obtain legal identity independent of their husbands, women to be allowed in standing for political election, and women should be allowed to find employments. These were the focus of the activists of this feminist movement. So if we talk about the structure and style of this poem, we see that this is a narrative poem, it is a fable. So it is a main problem. Usually there is a connection between form and content, but here the content is pretty dark, full of foreboding inner meanings. So there is a dichotomy. Rossetti is ending up portraying desire not in women's forte. Being a narrative poem, this poem implies the presence of a heroic figure. Who is heroic? Rossetti is giving a fable where she is portraying a woman with a desire as a fallen woman. And unlike the usual traditional male heroic figure, we have another woman coming out as a heroic figure. This is where Rossetti is different from the conventional narrative poets. So she subverts the allegory of Adam and Eve, and the man is here replaced by a woman. And that woman has the power of agency, the power to make a choice and a power to act. So we see that on one hand she is questioning agency, and on the other hand she is celebrating agency. Laura's agency is questioned and Lizzie's agency is celebrated. Lizzie and Laura, if we look at them, we see that they are two aspects of one individual. Laura is feminine, impulsive, emotional. These are the qualities wrongly associated with women. When Lizzie is logical, masculine, brave, wise, these are the qualities associated with men. So these are a few archetypes. Again, Rossetti is talking about all these aspects can be there in women. At the end we see that Lizzie follows social norms, yet she shows qualities with which women are not traditionally associated with. Again, we see that there is brotherhood versus sisterhood. Sisterhood is redemptive and brotherhood is corruptive. We have that thing like brother, queer brother, so that, and sisterhood is celebrated here. So here is the end of the poem Goblin Market. This is pretty long video, but I hope you will like it. For more videos like this, keep an eye on my channel. Thank you. Bye bye.